On day 111 of 66 and 26, we are finishing up another book of the Bible, 2 Corinthians. The Apostle Paul is finishing this letter to the church in Corinth by speaking about the success of his ministry. But success is not what you normally would think. We normally think of someone who has great strength or influence, those people who outwardly have their life all put together, and we trust those people. But Paul is saying success looks very different in Christ. He compares his ministry to those people who've come in after him, who he sarcastically calls super apostles. These are people who seem to be really strong and have their act together. They speak well, they're very articulate. And compared to them, Paul seems to be weak and not successful. And so Paul boasts, but not in what you would think. He boasts in shipwrecks and danger and being imprisoned and beaten. And then he goes on to say in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 30, if I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. And then 2 Corinthians 12, Paul talks about a thorn in his flesh, a messenger from Satan that torments him. And most likely, Paul's talking about some ongoing struggle that he has, maybe a sin that continues over and over to tempt him. And he's begging God, and he has 3 times begged God, take this thorn in the flesh away. And God answers, but not in the way that Paul would think or the way that we might hope. God answers by saying, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And it's not that God's power is at work in spite of weakness. No, God's power is at work through weakness. It's through Paul's weakness that God has shown his great power, because then people put their trust in God, not in Paul. And then Paul wraps up in 2 Corinthians 13 by calling on the Corinthian church, examine yourselves, this is verse 5, examine yourselves to see whether you are in the faith. So he's not saying, are you strong? Are you successful? But do you trust Jesus? Because that's the test. Not whether we have success outwardly, but whether we are in the faith. And that's what Paul calls the Corinthians to, and that is what we are called to trust in the Lord and actually to boast, not in our strengths and successes, but boast in our weakness so that God is elevated, Jesus Christ is magnified in our weaknesses.